Hey guys, it's White Cross, and this is an Advanced Stacking Techniques Volume 1 video where we're going to be talking about some of the techniques that you can use to build a more advanced stack. And this one is going to focus on rotation and maturity, in particular, how that relates to rotation. If you're new to the channel, thank you for being here. I'm glad you're spending some time with me today. I'd appreciate it if you'd subscribe to the channel so we can let you know about new videos as they are released. If you are a returning subscriber, I really appreciate you being with me here again today too. So this video is going to deal with some more advanced techniques, and as I start every video, I'd like to give a disclaimer. I'm not a financial advisor. I'm not trying to offer you financial advice. I'm simply trying to share some of my experiences. I've been doing this collecting, stacking, whatever you want to call it, for the last 3 or 4 decades. So, rotation and maturity. The problem that I have encountered with my stack over the last couple, maybe 10, 15 years is that I have used the technique of rotation to the point where my stack is somewhat mature. Rotation, you'll recall, is just that idea of cycling out of the more common items that you have, more generic items, more the newer items, the items that don't have that age or that scarcity. As I have acquired more of those pieces that do have that scarcity, that have that age, and have at least the potential for greater gains over a longer period of time than the more generic items do. So I use rotation and my stack has become more mature. My collection, my physical precious metals holdings, however you want to refer to it. And by that I mean I have cycled out of most of my more common pieces, and those tend to be the pieces that you acquire when you're kind of new to this phenomenon, to this physical precious metals arena. The more common generic 10-ounce bars, the generic rounds, maybe some foreign silver, things that the average new collector is attracted towards and has acquired in their own stack. Now, I want to make very clear that I have no problem with whatever it is you want to have in your physical precious metals holdings. The nice thing about this hobby, about this field, however you want to call it, is that it's really a personal preference. It really comes down to what you think you want to have your physical precious metals holding consist of. I am a coin collector before I am any kind of precious metals specialist. That is what brought me to this field in the first place, and that is how I see myself. And as a coin collector, we tend to focus on the items that are more scarce, that are the most original. And by originality, I mean that have the most original surfaces, that haven't been tampered with, that are in the best condition, pieces that haven't been harshly cleaned, that are maybe still in their original holders, still in their original packaging. Those tend to be the kinds of things that, generally speaking, coin collectors are drawn towards. And I have, just as a matter of course, applied those same concepts to my own physical precious metals holdings over time. So while I have cycled out of my more common things over time for those pieces that are older, more scarce, but also have those condition specifications that I mentioned before, the originality, the condition, those things all played a part in my deciding to move from the more common pieces towards the more interesting pieces. It's also important to point out, and if you're an advanced stacker, you're already well aware of this, that just because something is old, just because something is more scarce, does not mean it's more valuable. It's also important to remember that those attributes don't necessarily mean that something will become more valuable over time. The only way you can kind of make those decisions with any kind of possible foreseeing is with experience. You really need to kind of take a good look at the items that you're cycling into or that you are considering cycling into and deciding whether or not you think they have that capacity. This is a kind of a tricky area, and it's full of mistakes that I have made over time, thinking that something was more interesting. You talk about the fear of missing out. Some people call that FOMO, fear of missing out. Are you going to cycle from something that you've got in your stack, in your collection, for something that you think is going to be a better item to have in the future? That kind of grass is always greener concept. So maturity and rotation. I had an opportunity arise recently, and that's what sparked this video. And again, we may turn this into a series if there seems to be a good reaction to this, that I wanted to get your opinion of, and I'd like to see if you agreed with what I did and if you would have done anything any differently. So if you watched these videos before, especially if you've watched some of the earlier videos, you know that I'm a huge fan of Mexican silver. I love American silver too. I love classic silver bars, but Mexican silver in terms of bullion is one that's always been interesting to me, and it's one that I have rotated into over time. When I was starting to build my stack in earnest, let's call this the late 1990s, maybe all the way up until about 2005, so going back 15 or 20 years, one of the most commonly encountered items that I would see at my local stores were 10-ounce bars by Engelhard. We've talked about these before. I did a piece on them in the 10-ounce silver bar 999 advanced series. It comes as no surprise that I've got quite a few of these bars. All Engelhard calls these the second series standard commercial bar with the C prefix on the serial number. So these date to the late 1980s, right before they went with that eagle motif, 1987, 1988, somewhere in there. And Engelhard made about 450,000 of these bars, so they were a quite common bar. However, when I was building that stack in the early 2000s, while I would come across these bars with some frequency, I noticed more and more of these bars had been removed from their vinyl pouches. Now, you might say, what difference does it make? A silver bar is a silver bar, 10 ounces inside the pouch, outside the pouch thrown away. It doesn't make any difference. 10 ounces is 10 ounces. And I agree to an extent. But remember, like I said, I come at my physical precious metals holdings from a numismatic, from a coin collecting background. And as such, I always seem to be drawn towards those items that are the most original, the things that hadn't been cleaned, that are still in their original packaging. And if you want to, you can call it White Cross's choice. Walk into your store looking for a 10-ounce silver bar, and you are presented with a second series commercial bar by Engelhard, late 1980s, that is just lying there on the counter. We might call that raw in numismatics, out of its pouch, just naked lying there. And next to it, you have a second series standard commercial bar, C prefix, Engelhard, mid-1980s, still in its original vinyl pouch. The same price, the same premium, everything else is equal. Which one do you choose? White Cross's choice. 99% of the time, I think you'll agree that you're going to go with one that is still in its original vinyl. Why would you do that? Well, aside from it being more original and uncleaned, obviously, and having probably the fewest bumps and dings of the two choices, I'm encouraging you to always look at that exit strategy. So if you wanted to buy the bar that was not in the original vinyl, 10, 15, 20 years from now, if you wanted to sell it, which one do you think is going to have more valuable? That bar that's not in the package or the one that is still in the package? Remember, we've talked about attrition. I've talked about it in this video before, earlier too. Attrition is just the idea that there are fewer and fewer original examples left of anything collectible over time because of fires, floods, theft, meltings, damage, drop while you're making a video. Any of those kinds of things affect the number of survivors. That attrition comes into play. And I could tell when I was buying these bars in the early 2000s that there seemed to be fewer and fewer examples still in their original vinyl pouches. So those are the ones that I actually bought. I was given a choice all the time. And when I had the money, when I was in the looking for a 10-ounce bar, these were the ones that I picked up. So these are the ones that I have in my collection now. Mid 1980s, Engelhard made 450,000 of them in their original vinyl. These have become collectible, and I know that because I've actually exited. I've sold a few examples of it recently, and I was very fortunate to get $330 to $350 a piece for them. I was picking these up for about $125, $150 a piece when I was buying them. So these are the most common items that are in my stack. But I was presented recently, last week, with an original roll of silver Libertads. Now, again, I'm a big fan of Mexican silver. I always have been. This is an example of what these silver Libertads look like. This is an original roll. We call this a shotgun roll because it looks like a shotgun shell with that crimped end on it. And this is the way that the Libertads were sold from the Bank of Mexico when they were selling them in the mid-1980s, all the way through, I believe, the 1990s. This is a little bit unusual. Most coins that are issued by sovereign countries, and the examples that I'm thinking of are maples and silver eagles, have always been sold in those plastic tubes. For some reason, Mexico opted to put them in these shotgun rolls, which resemble the kind of crimped-ended rolls that you find pretty much any coin being issued through a bank. They all have these kinds of holders. So it's not unusual that some of these would have survived. People would have just taken these as they've come, the same way that somebody might put several rolls of silver eagles in those green-topped plastic holders in their safe deposit box. They might have put several of these shotgun rolls of Libertads in their safe deposit box. Now, I happen to know the person that offered these to me had had them for about 15 years, and they had been completely untouched and almost forgotten about. So I had to think long and hard about, when they offered to sell me one of these rolls, did I need more silver in my stack? And if I didn't need more silver, and in this case we're talking about the ratio between gold and silver, another topic we'll probably look at in depth in the future, I came to the conclusion that I didn't really want any more silver in my silver holdings. I have what I feel is a comfortable amount. So that led me to the position of rotation. Was I going to rotate out of something that I have plenty of, in this case, these silver Engelhard bars, and rotate into this unopened roll of silver Libertads? Again, I've got some Libertads, but I don't have nearly as many as I do in relation to these numbers of silver Engelhard bars. So I had to think about it, and I had to devote some serious time to it. But in the end, I came to the conclusion that I do have many more of these 10-ounce silver Engelhard bars still in their original vinyl, and I don't have very many rolls of Libertads. If you have pursued Libertads recently, you know that they have gone up in price quite a bit. I looked at eBay right before I started shooting this video, and a common uncirculated Libertad is selling for $35 or $40 a piece right now. Now, part of that is the premiums that people are paying, and premiums have skyrocketed over the last couple of years to the point where people seem to be paying $6, $8, $10, $12 an ounce premium for these nicer silver coins. I don't necessarily think that those premiums are going to last. It's impossible to predict what silver prices are going to do, and silver has fluctuated violently recently. So anybody who tells you they know where silver is going to be a year from now is probably not correct. However, I do think that these premiums are a little bit unrealistic, and it wouldn't surprise me if we saw those premiums start to drop over the coming months and even years. So I had to think about which one was going to increase, or at least have the potential to increase in value over the near term and also over the long term, as most of the items that I have in my collection has matured and I keep them in my collection. Will the silver bars continue to increase in value? Will the Libertads continue to increase in value? So $35, $40 a piece for these. I happen to know that these are in the $330 to $350 range, so it was pretty much a wash, the amount that I was being asked to pay for this roll versus the value of 20 ounces in the form of 2 bars. Again, 20 coins in a roll, so it's an equivalent amount of silver. It wasn't going to disrupt my ratio. I just felt like I either needed to keep the Engelhard or cycle or rotate into this roll of Libertads. And the answer is clear. I cycled into this roll of Libertads now. It's part of my permanent collection. Interesting to note that while the Libertads are selling for $30 to $40 a piece online, full unopened rolls do seem to have a higher premium. These seem to be selling for the $800 all the way up to $900 per roll price range in recent closed sales on auction sites like eBay. So that played a small part in my decision to rotate into the roll and to exit these two very similar Engelhard bars. But it wasn't the only factor that I took into consideration when I was deciding on this. Scarcity, originality, original holders, the greatest potential for increase in value. Everything seemed to be pointing towards the Libertads. The current premiums are fine, but that wasn't really a factor as I consider this long-term strategy, even a long-term exit strategy. I knew that these were the ones that I wanted to have, and that's the path that I chose. So what are your thoughts? Would you have done the same thing? Would you have killed to have gotten an original roll of sealed Libertads? Or would you have remained with the unopened 10-ounce Engelhard bars? Which one do you think has the greatest capacity to increase? Which direction would you have gone? Do you think I made a mistake out of cycling out of some of my 10-ounce Engelhard bars? Remember, these are just examples. I cycled out of some more that I had in exchange for these Libertads. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to hear your comments. I really would appreciate it if you leave me your opinion. Did I do the right thing? Would you have done something differently? I will be talking about Mexican silver coming up in a couple of videos. It's my intention to make 2 or maybe even 3 videos about Mexican silver pieces and where they relate to my stack and some ideas that you might want to consider. We did talk about the 10-ounce silver bars from Engelhard before, and I'll put a link down below to that 10-ounce bar video that I made recently. If you have any other suggestions that you'd like to see me consider for a video, please leave a comment below as well. I'll take a look at my holdings and my knowledge base and see if I've got anything I could add to that discourse. If you have any thoughts about these 2 silver vehicles, again, what would you have done? Please leave a comment below. I'd love to see what your thoughts are. And as always, thank you for allowing me to be a part of your journey as you go deeper into the world of physical precious metals.